Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media. That's Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. And don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. I have a story up now about the early impact of the veteran leadership, notably with Bobby Wagner. And we'll have more on him on Wednesday when I play an interview I had with him from the other day. Today, oh, by the way, don't forget, if you want to become a club member of the show, you can go to the Ampire Media YouTube page, click the word join, and find the club level membership that you want to participate in. For you gold members, I'm going to have a private Zoom for you with former tight end Logan Paulson at some point after the mini camp ends. So stay tuned for information on that. Your chance to ask him the questions that you want to know from him. So in a minute, I'll be joined by ESPN's Louis Riddick as we break down the Commanders' offseason and talk a lot about Jayden Daniels, why he felt Daniels was to him, the best quarterback in this draft. And that's something I told you before. It's something I've heard from other people that certainly there was some people who felt like he was. Now, clearly, more people felt like Caleb Williams was, but Daniels certainly had some people who felt he was for sure. And Louis Riddick is among them, but even in the league, there are definitely some people who felt like he was maybe the better number one pick. And I told you before, more people I talked to felt the gap between he and Jayden was much closer than the gap between Jayden and the other QBs after him. And it was not unanimous in that way, but I think that was more of a consensus more than a unanimous opinion. Anyways, spitting that word out. So stay tuned for Louis. And by the way, there are no OTAs this week, so not going to be any OTA reports. They resume their OTA work next week. That will be week 3 of the OTA work. And we'll have a day out there to watch them again. And then the week after that is their mini camp. Right now, it's scheduled for 3 days. Typically, as I'm sure you know, that third day gets canceled, but we will see. Anyways, that's it. Here's my conversation with ESPN's Louis Riddick. Enjoy. Louis, appreciate you coming on. Just want to start with, in general, your impression of the Commanders' offseason, which has been very, very busy.
Yeah, look, I think, John, when you have a totally new regime, and I mean totally, you've seen the change that has happened. But when you have a totally new regime from ownership on down, it's going to be busy because there's going to be a lot of moving parts. You have a primary owner, and then you have secondary owners who are kind of like, or minority owners who are high-profile individuals. And then you have a new general manager who is trying to get to know ownership while at the same time go through an extensive process of hiring a new head coach, now with Dan. And then the biggest, most important position on your football team, you're trying to kind of go, okay, look, we're trying to solidify probably the most important entity in the entire operation. Who are we going to pick? Assuming that obviously Chicago is going to take the guy that they took, and that's who they took. Are we sure with the guy that that we're going to wind up taking? And then of course there's a lot swirling around the fact that they bring in all the quarterbacks, at the last minute and make sure they get one last look at them and all. I mean that's a lot. That's a lot to try and make sure that you get all heading in the right direction. And it'd be tough right now to really fault them for any of the decisions that the new ownership group and led by Josh Harris has made at this point, because Adam is someone who everyone in the league really respects. He comes from a background that is very well rooted and well versed in terms of fundamental team building. He's had some great mentors. The mentors that he's come from those guys have all been very successful. Dan Quinn is someone who I really like. Got a chance to talk to him and especially about just how much he really dove into what was it that didn't allow him to be as successful as he wanted to be in stint 1, as opposed to when he got his chance again in stint two, what were some of the changes that he would make? And he really took himself apart and put himself back together as far as what he felt that he needed to do, as he explained to us in our production meetings. So I'm excited to see how this all comes together. I really am. I mean, you have Kliff Kingsbury now, right? He's getting another chance to not be obviously be a head coach, but to really affect the most important guy in that entire building over there in Ashburn right now, and that being Jayden Daniels. So I mean, it's a lot, but it's exciting as hell. And I would assume that fan base there, and you know better than anyone, is probably just chomping at the bit to see what this all looks like when they get out on the football field and play even just a preseason game.
And I think part of that too is that it starts at the top. So I was going to ask you too, you were here under the old regime. You follow this franchise now in your role, and you with the Eagles, and now in your current role with ESPN. Yeah. How do you perceive this organization and the ability to build a winner compared to even a couple of years ago?
I think for them, the most important thing is anything that happened prior to them doesn't mean a damn thing. Right. They are not, they should not be held accountable for any of the dysfunction that has surrounded that place in years past. And quite honestly, like the way it was when I was there, that has nothing to do with them. These guys should be judged based off of everything that happens going forward. And right now, without them playing any football games and being able to, stack up wins and or losses, and hopefully not too many losses, I think all you can go by is based off of what their resume has shown previous to when they arrived in Washington. And like I said, look, Dan is someone who took a team to a Super Bowl, was right on the cusp of winning a Super Bowl. And, obviously they don't get the job done against maybe the greatest head coach quarterback combination of all time. That's nothing to hang your head about. He has, like I said, he has taken himself apart, put himself back together. I think he knows what needs to be done this time around. I think the way in which they have methodically gone about trying to reconstruct this roster, build it in the image of Dan Quinn, because ultimately that's what Adam's job is going to be, to put this team together in the image of the head coach. Otherwise, if you don't want to put it together in the image of the head coach, then you have the wrong head coach, because it's not about you, the GM. It's about the guy who literally is managing the football team from ground level, and that's the head coach. So he's trying to build up a strong defensive line, build this team inside out, build it front to back. You've heard me talk about this over and over and over again, through the years. And I think offensively, they had to get that guy who can elevate, not just not just take his play and take it from one level to the next, to the next, to the next, like you've seen Jayden Daniels do from his time at Arizona State to his last year at LSU, but elevate everyone else around him. And by all accounts, I mean, you've seen it down there, you've been around it. It sounds like, even though now they haven't, I would assume they haven't even really gone through like extensive 11 on 11 yet. He is infusing everyone else down there with confidence, with the way the ball doesn't hit the ground, with his demeanor, his grasp of the offense up until this point. That's all the same things that people at LSU told you.
Right.
He really dove into all that when he first got there, and it seems like he's diving into it when he gets there. So again, you haven't played any games. We haven't stacked up any wins or losses yet, but it seems like they sure are on the right track.
And I guess what I was meaning too is, do you feel like there's more hope for this franchise now because of all those changes?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, and I said this, said that, right at the beginning here, and I didn't mean to go off on a tangent here, but these guys, their competency, their resume all speaks for itself. Look, Josh Harris is one of the most successful businessmen in this country, and he's someone who has extensive experience in terms of owning sports franchises. Magic Johnson is one of the most successful businessmen in this country, one of the most decorated athletes in the history of the world, quite honestly, not just the NBA basketball, but in history. Adam comes from two places that have just steeped in the tradition of winning. And I would assume that how meticulous he was this offseason will continue to be the case down the road, John. So, I mean, there's nothing that leads me to believe that anyone should feel any lack of confidence in terms of what they've established to this point at all. And then the way in which they went about the draft And the guy who they picked, look, I think it could be another one of those situations. And this isn't to take anything away from Caleb Williams, just like it wasn't to take anything away from Bryce Young a year ago. I think they got the best quarterback. I think the best quarterback fell to them. And Jayden, I'm hoping, does the same thing for them that CJ Stroud did for Houston and D'Amico Ryans did for Houston a year ago. I really do think it could be that kind of situation in Washington, although obviously Dan's situation is much different than D'Amico's.
Why do you feel that Jayden was the best quarterback in this draft?
Because, someone explained it to me like this, people who worked with him at LSU. Jayden didn't run from responsibility at LSU. He ran towards it. When things started to get a little sideways, he didn't shrink from the situation. He expanded and grew and kind of like dove into the situations and tackled every situation head on. That mindset, that championship mindset, that leadership mindset, combined with his just unique physical skills, that's the kind of thing that gives you a shot, as long as everything else around you doesn't crumble. And I think, we've been talking about everything else around him. All indications are they're not going to crumble around him. They're going to continue to give him the kind of things that would allow him to continue to elevate and ascend. And the people there at LSU down in Baton Rouge believe that he is rock solid. He will not crack. He will not shrink. He will not run away from the responsibility of being a franchise quarterback. And then when you get all that out of the way and you just watch him throw, it's beautiful. It's the repeatable mechanics, the consistency, feet, hips, torso, the ability to change arm angles, that compact, quick delivery, velocity, combination of velocity and touch, hit all levels of the field. And then his ability to run. I mean, come on, man. I mean, how can you not be just fired up as hell about that?
It's funny too, because along those lines, like the things that jumped out at me, one, the Oregon game as a freshman, where he really didn't know what he's doing as a passer, but the competitiveness in that game, but also too, going to the best conference and then excelling. Like those, I think, were things that resonate as well.
There were people who didn't feel as though that Jayden was ready for that challenge in the SEC, that he wasn't ready for the responsibility of going to LSU, believe it or not. And he used that as motivation. And he really did take that challenge very seriously and do everything he could to make sure that, not necessarily that you're proving the doubters wrong, but to give himself a chance to really be successful. And the people down there who were coaching him both on the field in terms of actually playing the game, and coaching him off the field that would help him on the field in terms of his mindset and his approach, said he was 100% all in from day one. He was not half-assing it in any way, shape, or form. He was 100% all the time. And look, man, that's what you want. That's what you want. And when I watched him down at LSU at his pro day, there were some people who thought, that the group of players overall were almost a little bit too giddy that day in terms of their excitement and all. I loved it. I loved how him and Malik and Brian Thomas Jr., I loved how all those guys were getting together, before they actually got to the throwing part of their pro day. Because once that part started, Jayden took it over. It was his. And it wasn't a quarterback coach telling him, bringing all the guys together and going, okay, you're going to do this. No, it was Jayden who was like, bring them together, make sure everybody has a drink, make sure everybody's fresh for the next phase of what we're going to do here. And he ran the entire thing. And I know people go, well, that's what a quarterback's supposed to do. Well, that's not what every quarterback does, though. And there's guys who do it, and then there's guys who you go, that authentically is who he is all the time. There's guys who are just putting on a show for the scouts and coaches, and then the people who are authentic. I didn't get any impression that anything he did was not authentically who he was. And again, those are all the data points. That's all you can go by.
Right.
That's all Adam Peters is going by. That's all the Josh Harris is going by. That's all that Dan Quinn's going by. And when you have guys on that football team already saying, I just like being around him. He's just one of those guys who just has a magnetic quality that we want to be around. That's the kind of feedback you want right out of the gate.
Kid's always smiling, man.
Yeah. He like, what did he say? he said, "Look, I'm like, I guess like one of his first press availabilities that he had down there after, I guess, the rookie minicamp. He said, I'm just kind of like a kid just pinching himself,
Right.
over the realization that I'm here,
Right.
which is, we're all, we all are kind of like programmed now to give the stock BS answers, like, I'm just taking it day by day, just trying to get better. It's just a job. It's just another. No, it isn't. That's huge, and it's cool for you to recognize and kind of like express the fact that I can't even believe I'm here. Like, this is a dream come true. That authentic quality of his, I think, is going to endear himself to the people down there, John. And look, you've been down there a long time, dude. That's what they need. They need
1,000%.
authentic. They need authentic characters down there, and I think you're going to get one with him.
And it's funny that you say that too, because there are a couple of things that people who hear him talk now. It's like, this is who he is. Like the way, I'm coming here to play my role, doing all that. But he's also been described, somebody who worked with him for a long time calls him, he and his dad, football nerds. And his dad was telling me too, just like how he and Jayden would watch the draft every year together. And then even the last couple of years, they text during the draft. And like, so there is that, I think there's a giddiness to it, but also an appreciation for where he's at. I think that rubs off on other guys.
Yeah. You know what? In basketball right now, there's a guy who's kind of like taking the NBA by storm in Anthony Edwards because of that authentic nature, that authentic youthful quality that he has. He just says what he feels, and it's not, let me think, how will John Keim interpret this? How will people write about it? He's like, I don't care. I'm just going to tell you who I am. And it's not in a disrespectful way.
Right.
It's not in a way where you're kind of like trying to go off the beaten path and say something that's just going to grab headlines. You're just being who you are. And some people have it and some people don't. Anthony Edwards has it, and that's why the Minnesota Timberwolves are the team that everybody wants to watch right now. Jayden has that, and I believe that as we go through the summer and you guys get into training camp and he starts playing in games, it's gonna ignite that whole area of the country in a way that hasn't been ignited before. We certainly didn't have that when I was there.
Right.
Any of the quarterbacks, and look, and I like Mark Brunell, and I love Patrick Ramsey and Jason Campbell. Those are all my dudes. Love them all. None of them have this, what that kid has. None of them. And they haven't had it since he left either. And that includes RG3 and anybody else.
Right.
He has something much different.
I agree. This is very different. I think the authentic aspect is very real, but I also think it's the work that he wants to put in on the aspects of being a quarterback that, and away from Instagram too.
Yeah. We know that people very much so tailor their behavior to what will get them likes and follows, man. And it's just, that's a whole nother podcast, bro. That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, no, I agree. The other thing is too, like, so you were here when Washington signed London Fletcher. The impact he made. They signed Bobby Wagner this offseason. There's that similar leadership, same position, it's all that. How did London, and with his play and his leadership, how did he impact the franchise that year? The year you were here?
Well, it's like the system was one that he already knew. So he was like an extension of Greg Williams on the field. Bobby can be the same thing for Dan. It's a system he already knows. That now he can just he can give you those extra inches in terms of, this is how you can really excel in this system to everyone else. These are the things that he's really, that Dan's really trying to get across to you. Let me give it to you from a player's perspective, not just from the coach's perspective. And let me show you how to do it in real time. And then let me show you how to be a professional in real time, day after day after day after day after day after day after day. And those are the kind of things that London did when he was there. And in the command and control center, which is really what the Mike Backer position is, you've got to have that. You've absolutely, you just have to have a guy who has those qualities. And then when you combine it with having those qualities in this specific situation where, he's really an extension of the play caller on that side of the ball, and in this particular situation, he's an extension of the head coach. Those are the home run free agent signings. Those are the kind of situations that you're looking for, because those are the ones that usually work out the very best. And we saw it. We saw it. Look, when London came, back in those years in the mid 2000s. Remember now, Philip Daniels kind of had the same impact on the team on the defensive line because he was an extension of Greg Blash, who had known him in Chicago. It's those kind of things. Walt Harris, as good as he was, because Greg knew him as well. Although Walt couldn't stay healthy, it was the same kind of thing, the exact same kind of thing. Those are the signings that always pay off for you, and I'm hoping that Bobby pays off for them in the same way.
What did you see in his play last year? And just, again, I go like to London because London clearly had some good years left.
Yeah. I didn't watch Bobby as closely last year as maybe I would like to. And I will probably dig into him a little bit more this year, because in particular, because of the importance of the position and because of how, if he does have a lot left in the tank still, he's a guy that can really affect this defense in a positive way. But knowing Bobby like I do, and I have covered him extensively, and I've talked to him, on, post game for Monday Night Football when I was on Monday Night Countdown. He's a pro's pro, man. He just is, and that they wouldn't bring him in there at this point in his career if he wasn't someone who could still affect the football team on 3 downs, and not be one of those guys who's just a 2-down spot player who really wasn't going to have an effect on the money downs that they really need that position to have. So get back to me on that one when I actually really dig into his play from 2023, John. And I will tell you, because you know me, I'm not shy as far as making predictions, dude.
Yeah, no, and it's funny because when you were in Washington when Joe Gibbs came, and there was with Greg Williams turn around that defense.
Mm-hmm.
What is a key to a turnaround of a unit? Like what has to happen?
Oh, I think one, you have to have guys who are real smart football players who don't beat themselves first. So football intelligence is critical in order for it. Like you can have 11 great athletes, but if they're dumb or don't really play smart football or don't play together, you're just going to give up big plays over and over and over again. And explosive plays are the bane of every defense and every defensive coordinator's existence. Explosive plays. And then I think the next thing is, look, your ability to play fundamentally sound techniques and be able to repeat them over and over from a physical standpoint. So you need to be smart first and foremost, and then you need to be able to repeat the techniques over and over again, which comes with coaches being able to help players, give players just enough to be able to go out there and execute and play them fast again and again. And not every coach can get that message across. Not every coach can. Dan Quinn is one of those dudes who I think most players who have played for him will tell you he gives you just enough to allow you to continue to play fast. Doesn't try to overload you, gives you a few things to think about, a few things to focus on at all 3 levels, defensive line, linebacker, and secondary, to where you can play fast. So I think it's that. Have smart players, have great teachers that give players just enough to be able to go out there and play fast. And Greg Williams, Jerry Gray, Greg Blash, all those guys back in the day, some of the best teachers this game's ever seen.
That was a great staff. I really enjoyed that staff.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, Blash scared me though. Blash scared me though. And players would, I'm just kidding though, but players would say because Greg Williams dropped the F-bomb left and right. It was like, it was like eating, he was just picking out a box of cracks, where he's just going to drop the F-bombs. But when they would say, when Blash would use it, they got scared.
Oh yeah. Greg didn't, he wasn't much, he didn't have much time for bullshit.
No.
To be blunt with you. He really didn't. Greg was about discipline, fundamentals, being accountable, being available, and then about hunting, right? That's what he loved to do. He loved to, he'd see him out in the back of, down there behind the football fields out there in his camo, out there hunting. He was a real simple dude, man. A real simple dude, but he had a keen eye for talent. He's a great tactician. He was just kind of a man's man. And, honestly, to be able at that time to have all of those egos together, it's interesting. It's interesting, John, because someone told me this along, well, Ernie, of course, he told me, egos are fine. You can have a team, all guys at that level have egos. It's agendas that kill things.
Right.
And those guys all had the same agenda, which was we're going to put together the baddest defense possible in terms of being fast, intimidating, fundamentally sound. We have all this brain power and stuff. And they seemed to make it work. They were able to put their egos aside long enough to have that team get turned around and have it be a top 2 unit in the entire NFL. When obviously on offense, we couldn't do crap.
No.
We sucked on offense. Well, we won a playoff game down there in Tampa. What? We had less than 100 yards of total offense.
Yeah.
How do you do that? How do you do that? And there was a lot of that was attributed to the brain power we had on the coaching staff and just some absolute hunters on the defensive side too now.
Yeah, it was good. What did you learn most from Gibbs?
Oh, how to be just be steady and not get too emotional about things. Because look, he was dealing with a lot of egos himself, right? You're dealing with owner, Greg Williams, Greg Bloss, Jerry Gray, Sean Taylor. I mean, you've got Clinton Portis. I mean, that's a lot right there, man. That's a lot. And then you're running your NASCAR team too. I remember being in draft meetings where he'd get calls from who knows, maybe it was Arthur, maybe it was people from Home Depot and from sponsorship calls and all this stuff, but he was always very, very steady and consistent. And I think as a leader, when you're getting pulled in 1,000 different directions, man, you got to be great with time management. You have to be great in terms of your approach, your mental approach, and not get too high, too low, and get too emotional. Now he got emotional now and then.
Yeah.
But Joe, he was very even keel at that time, which is probably what I learned about him, learned from him the most.
Just a couple more things. I appreciate it. When you look back on the Spurrier era, what do you think about?
It was just that wasn't pro football for me. Like Joe epitomized again that kind of steady professionalism and competency that you're looking for. Like I had come from a time in football where like I played for Belichick and Saban, dude, at the same time. I mean, you're talking about graduate level stuff, not just from what they're teaching you, but from the way in which they expect you to conduct yourself, the way in which meetings were organized, practices were organized, scripts were put together, the way you were, required to prepare, how you were held accountable. There was none of that at that time. There was none of that. I mean, so it was just Greg Williams, I believe, was the one who coined the phrase, it's hard enough to win because of in the NFL. It's impossible to win in spite of. And we were winning in spite of, there being, just chaos at different points in time. And you can't win that way. You can't win consistently. I mean, you can rise up and have a couple good games here and there, but you're not going to win consistently. And that's what those times remind me of, unfortunately.
Yeah, Marvin Lewis was running that show that first year. That's why it was 7, and that's why they had any sort of chance whatsoever.
You remember the stories of them going down for the first practice, and coach saying, we'll offensive practice here and defensive practice there, and Marvin goes, "No, we can't do that. We don't have enough guys. We have to practice together here." Like that right there tells you that. Come on, that's what you were battling.
There was one time, and I tell the story a lot, that when you guys are on, and it's a draft, and this is back when the media was in the building, right? And we're sitting there talking to Spurrier at the door to go in the media room, and he looks up at the TV. He's like, "Oh, we're on the clock. I better go." Like, this is a draft.
Yeah.
It is.
That's just the way, that's the way things were. And you know what? Look, man, there's a lot of people who love Coach Spurrier and a tremendous amount of respect for him. And look, he was successful as heck in college football, and you'll never be able to take that away from him. But the NFL is it's a different animal. And I think we all found that out at that point in time.
Well, last thing, Kliff Kingsbury. what are your thoughts on him as a play caller, offensive coach, and what kind of impact can he have here?
Yeah, I think, look, you saw the kind of impact that he had on Kyler Murray's career and how he was able to devise an offense that really allows him to use his entire skill set. I think you saw what he was able to do along with Lincoln at SC with Caleb. Hopefully he'll be able to combine those two things together and be able to keep Jayden upright, coach Jayden to not take some of the hits that he took at LSU. I think of some of the hits like against Ole Miss that he took in Mississippi State. Just get some of that out of him while at the same time exploit his ability to throw the football with accuracy, throw the deep ball, and use his run skills. He's had experience coaching quarterbacks like him before and getting the very most out of him. It's got to be exciting for him. And I would, until proven otherwise, I would think that he'll do a great job of extracting everything out of him that the fan base is hoping he can get out of.
How would you rate the talent around Jayden on offense?
Look, I think the offensive line is where it will all hinge.
Right.
I think that's where it'll hinge. As long as he can stay protected, stay comfortable in the pocket, the talent around him will continue to be a work in progress, and Adam will continue to add. But it's all gonna, like, when you say talent, like most people think, well, tell me about the receivers and the tight ends and the backs and all. Yeah, I get it. But up front is where it'll all start. You don't want him, next thing you know, having the kind of career where you're constantly worrying about his availability, like the last LSU phenom to come into the league, like you worry about him in Cincinnati and Joe Burrow. Yep. You don't want that. You don't want him to have to excel in spite of getting his ass kicked like Joe has to in Cincy. And they've thrown so many resources at the offensive line, and people still just want to talk about, man, but he's got Tyler Boyd, and he had Tyler Boyd, and he has Jamar, and he has T. It's like, yeah, that's all cool. But ask Joe what he would really like it. I think he'd really like to not be getting sacked 50 plus times a year. So hopefully that's where a lot of their focus is, and that's where it can all start for him.
Louis, I appreciate your time, man. Great insight. Thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Louis for joining me, and thank you, as always, for tuning in. I'll be back on Wednesday when I'm going to play my interview with Bobby Wagner. Now, it is an audio interview because when you're doing those one-on-ones and you're sitting there on a bench, it's really awkward to hold a camera in somebody's face. So you're going to do it in an audio, but you will enjoy the interview. A lot about leadership and what he feels he can do now as a vet, and then also his thoughts on Jayden Daniels. So stay tuned for that on Wednesday. So I'll talk to you next time.